My name is Randy Rubenstein, and welcome to the Mastermind Parenting Podcast. At Mastermind Parenting, we're on a mission to support strong-willed kids and the families that love them. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to this week and this new series with Michaeleen Doucleff, the author of Hunt, Gather, Parent. She and I are going to be sitting down and having a series of conversations, and we are open. Our intentions are that we just want to our intention is that we just want to hang out together. So, and we're going to let all of you be a fly on the wall of us hanging out together and talking about parenting, and hopefully talking about it in a way that maybe you haven't heard before. So thanks for doing this with me. I'm super excited to hang out with you.
Oh, gosh, Randy, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited too.
My intention for this series is to begin a different conversation about parenting that goes beyond 3 tips. For anyone who's been listening to the podcast or in any of my groups, you know that Michaeleen's book, Hunt, Gather, Parent, is the only parenting book I recommend. And I hadn't read a parenting book in years. I read it. I'm now listening to it on Audible. It's so good. And you talk about parenting in a way that I hadn't heard. And even as I'm reading it and listening to it, I'm cringing a little bit about me falling into that category of here's 3 tips, just say it like this. And I'm like, oh, I think I've been part of the problem. Like all of, our Western culture where there's just so many parents feel like we need to perform and try to be these perfect parents. It's almost like I like to use the saying, like we're playing the perfect parent on TV, but
yes,
what happens behind the curtains when the camera's not rolling? Like that's when the shit hits the fan and everyone's like pulling their hair out.
Yes.
And so I'm like, let's have a meatier conversation that feels deeper, richer, and also like using real words that aren't so clinical. Like I loved reading the stories of you going in and living with these indigenous, families, and if I say anything that is like the wrong way to phrase anything and it feels politically incorrect, please correct me.
Okay.
Because I don't want to worry about it, and I don't want to be like too cautious about how I phrase things, and I may say something wrong because I do.
Because it changes all the time. What's politically correct? So it's a moving target.
Yeah, I know. So just correct me. But like you went in and you just like observed them and learned from them on such a human level, and nobody was like talking about exactly the what the theory is necessarily behind this, even though I know you went and you talked to all the anthropologists and the psychologists and you did a lot of research. Like the part that was so captivating to me about the book was the real stories in the trenches.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way parents have learned to interact with children, right? For 100,000 years, right? Is through interacting with real people, right? Your mom, your grandma, your neighbor. That's the way parents are supposed to learn to parent, right? It's not through, ironically, a book or a research or a scientist or a man that's an expert. I love in the book I talk about this guy that wrote some of the early parenting books, and he was like a sports writer who was like all into guns, and like he shot his hand or his finger off one time, and like this guy is the guy that's like giving parents advice. It's like no, we're supposed to learn by listening to other parents, watching other parents. And I think also what gets lost is kind of respecting the little voice inside you that says, I don't think this is quite right, or I want to do it this other way, and kind of really being confident in some of your instincts, I think is also what gets lost in there.
Parents, like if I even just think in my own community and also the parents that I've interacted with professionally, I keep thinking about this a lot of times when I'm working with people, I'll say, like, I try to pull out, what do you think a good mom looks like?
Mm,
Like if you had to describe a good mom in 3 adjectives, what would it be? And a lot of times when I ask them, like, who were your role models growing up? People don't have role models.
mm,
A lot of times they know that they don't want to do it the way it was done for them,
mm.
but they don't know exactly how they do want to do it. And so I'll
Yeah.
say, well, let's think of a TV family, right? Like what was that TV family that just represented the family that you really wanted? And that's when people were like, "Oh, well, I loved the mom on this show, or I loved the dad on this show." And then we start talking about, well, what does that look like? And I
Right.
think, part of the problem is that we haven't, we look around our current community and it's hard to find the example, that also appeals to your intuition. And I think that's why so many
Yeah.
people are confused and second guessing every decision and overthinking every decision. Like,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. We've lost the role models. And I think we also give power to kind of the wrong people in some ways, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this book is really about giving power to these people that kind of we would think would be the last people to give us advice, right? Somebody that's 5,000 miles away in a little tiny Inuit fishing village, but it turns out they're actually incredibly knowledgeable because they have this knowledge that's been passed down, right, for generation to generation. They've held on to these traditional ways of interacting with children. I think something that's important is that I think two things. I think one, we are all trying way too hard.
Yeah.
Something that I realized when I was in Tanzania, actually, and Rosie and I had traveled for, 2 months at that point. I was exhausted. We were literally in a tent, and I would just lay there in the morning and I would realize, like, I am trying way too hard. Just every moment I am trying to do something
Mm-hmm.
for my child. And what I saw these parents, these moms mostly, and the dads too, was just how simple the parenting was and how incredibly easy. For instance, like getting kids to help, right? Like we do all this stuff, chore charts, all these scripts, say this, say that, beg, nag. Like there's just an enormous amount of effort, kind of, I think, spinning your wheels a lot. And literally what one of the moms in Tanzania, one of the Hadzabe moms would do is like, we go out into the bush to like collect water, say. Literally, she would hand Rosie a bottle to carry. Or we'd be out in the bush, like, and then Rosie would carry it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like there was no question of like, what am I doing? Who's helping? Is everyone helping? Like, okay, everyone needs to take a bottle. Oh no, Rosie, you're not taking a bottle. You need to take a bottle. There's none of this like kind of enormous amounts of energy happening. It was literally take this bottle. And
Mm-hmm.
then they would take a baby and put it on my back.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, it wasn't like, Michaeleen, can you help with a child? Let's plan this all out. It was like, carry the baby, like stick it on my back. Or we would go out to collect firewood. And when we would come back, they'd hand Rosie a couple sticks to carry,
Mm.
and it just, first of all, there was very little talking, very little instruction, and it all just kind of flowed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what we're missing is this like flow, right? This like, what is really just the minimal thing needed to get the kid going and every day, to get the kid to school, to get the kid to sleep, to get the kid to do homework? Like what's minimally kind of needed?
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise you can stop.
Mm-hmm.
You can just watch.
Mm-hmm.
You can just relax.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what we think of as good parenting is like doing something at every moment,
Mm-hmm.
looking for things to say, looking for things to fix. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, if you look around the world and throughout time, and what a lot of psychologists would argue, a much better approach is the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually pulling yourself back. Parents would even tell me, like, I intentionally don't say something, and just watching, just being. You still have to do some things, right? We do, and every parent does, but it's it's like you can just exhale and do nothing for a day. You could do nothing for an entire day and your kid will be okay. I'm telling you. If they're over like 3, they'll be all right. To just do nothing and see what happens.
Well, it's interesting. I looked on TikTok and searched Hunt Gather Parent because I know that like you had heard from your publisher that there was a bunch of people on TikTok that were reading the book. So I
Yes.
went and I did a search and I watched a couple of the videos. And the thing that so many of the moms, especially the moms of little tiny kids, were talking about was the exact same thing when I think it was the first thing that hooked me in truly into the book was um like I don't have to play with my
Yes.
kid. And they're all talking about it on TikTok. They're like, guess what? You don't have to play with your kid. Like you can include them in things that you need to do that you're doing for them or for the family. So like that, you
That's
talk
right.
about it in the book, like togetherness, right? Like
Yes.
little kids just want to be with you all the time. And they also are naturally inclined to be helpful, but we
Yes.
accidentally train. And I was guilty of this. And I'm seeing, I like after listening to this part in the book last night, I noticed it with my 17-year-old son at the dinner table that like I literally trained him to be unhelpful, right?
Yes, that is what we do. And that is something that's been shown actually through not just like people looking at other cultures and looking at our culture, but also like lab experiments have shown that what we do actually teaches children not to help.
Well, I mean, if I think about myself, by the time he came around, especially, I had 3 kids. I have a big gap between him and like 8 years between my oldest and youngest. So by the time Corey came around, like especially at dinner time, I'm exhausted. I've had a full day and I'm just trying to get dinner on the table as quickly as possible. So the last
Yes.
thing I'm doing is including him. Instead, I'm usually pushing him to the side or probably putting him in front of a television show. That was when I would say,
Yeah.
that's when it worked for me, is I would put him in front of a show while I could do the mad scramble to try and get dinner on the table. And so he's in front of a screen. I'm not dealing with him. And y'all know what it's like when you're pushing your kid to play with toys or putting them in front of a screen. Before you know it, they're like, Mommy, play with me now. Are you done yet? Will you play with me? Will you play with me?
Right.
Will you play with me? And so now, not on top of all the things that you're having to do, you also have this kid that you're feeling guilty because they are begging you to be with them and you're pushing them off. And so
Right.
what that looks like now in a 17-year-old, dinner looks a little different now because it's not a mad scramble. He's the only kid at home. And I'm like, whatever, finishing up dinner and this table is set and he's now sitting waiting for his dad and waiting to start dinner. And he's sitting there looking at his phone at the table. And because I just read the book, I'm like, Corey, look around the table and see what needs to get done still. And he like looks around and he's like, oh, water glasses. And I was like, he's like, are you asking me to do the water glasses?
Oh, fascinating.
And this was so on my radar because I just listened to it. And I was like, I don't know. What do you see needs to still get done? Like we sit down to dinner and what is missing from the table? He's like, if you want me to do the water glasses, just ask me to do the water glasses.
Fascinating.
And
That's so fascinating, Randy.
yeah, I mean, and I felt like I felt annoyance bubbling up inside of me. And I'm like, well, I'm not asking you to do anything. You're a full-fledged member of this family and a 17-year-old, young man who has a job and is going to college next year. Like you're fully capable human. You assess what needs to be done and then get it done. And he's like, got it. He's annoyed. I'm annoyed. Now he co-regulates with me. He's annoyed. But really, I trained him to be
Yes.
unhelpful.
Well, I think number one, he knew what was needed to be done, which is great, right? he knew. He looked around and he knew. I think a lot of kids wouldn't even know. So you trained him to know what was helpful. What's missing is the initiation.
Yep.
Oh, I can do that on my own without you telling me.
Yep.
Right? You kind of trained him to do what you say, which is, that's what a lot of parents want, right? So,
yeah.
Right. But what's missing is that like self-driven agency part. Now, I will tell you that you can train him now to do that, to take initiative on his own, because I trained my husband to do it at 40. So it's not lost.
Right. It's on my radar. And I've been same. It's like humans are malleable and we can all continue learning. And it's really for the people surrounding you to have agency, which is a topic that I very much talked about on the last masterminding monthly coaching call that I did, all about like crazy school mornings and how to make them less crazy, is helping your kids or supporting your kids in having agency over their own lives, where they feel in control. They're not feeling controlled by you. They're in the driver's seat and they're responsible for getting their tasks done. And you support them in that. But ultimately, when people have agency, then they own the task, right? Because they feel like they're in the driver's seat and they're in control. So I know that it's possible. And now that this is more on my radar, like Corey all my kids, I will say, in other areas, they have been like, they're so helpful, whenever I've had an older kid that starts driving, I never have to ask them, will you go and take your brother? Will you do that? I remember when my daughter, like when Corey started, he was going to bar mitzvah parties at 13. And it's like the worst, because you all of a sudden realize that with teenagers, when they have their own social life, like you have to like stay up, and like some of these parties would end at like 11:30 and midnight. And so now you're having to like go and pick them up at 11:30 and midnight. And I remember my daughter, she was driving by that point. She was like 17. And when Corey was in his bar mitzvah season, she'd be like, what bar mitzvahs does Corey have? I'll drive him home. And I didn't ask, I'd be like, that is so helpful. Thank you so much. And she's like, no, my pleasure. Like, I'm a teenager. I'm a night owl. I love driving. I'm a new driver. I'm always looking for excuses to drive. I don't have big plans. I'm happy to do it. So in other ways, they've been super helpful, but this, helping around the house, and especially around, the dinner table, not so much.
This is I think a really beautiful example of like what happens when children and I'm not saying you do this at all, Randy. I'm just saying this is what I see and
I probably
what
do.
I've learned.
Yeah.
I really thought that I was giving Rosie, I call in the book autonomy. I think that's what you're calling agency, right? Mm-hmm. This is something that is probably, if you could give your child anything, and there's a quote in the book from a psychologist that says this, if you could give your child anything that would change their lives, it's autonomy. There's just no other question. There's just nothing that rises to this level of importance. And American parents in studies will say that they value this and they give their child this. But when you actually look at what they do, they don't. So it's one of the big paradoxes of Western parenting is that parents value autonomy and think they give it to their children, but then in actuality, they don't. And I would actually argue that most parents that I've interacted with in America don't know how to give a child autonomy. And I think that this thing of like, well, are you asking me to set the table, is an example of kind of the result of like when a child has been like, been told what to do, right? So much that it's like I'm not even going to do something unless you tell me what to do, right? I would say if I was coaching a parent, one of the first things I would try to teach the parent is how to give a child autonomy, because I thought I was giving Rosie autonomy when she was 3. And I thought I was, this very relaxed, easygoing, let her choose. And then when I was traveling, especially in Tanzania, I realized I wasn't even close to giving her autonomy. So I think it's something that our society doesn't teach us. We don't have role models for what it looks like when a child is autonomous. But it's very interesting because it's like, then at 17, it's like, well, are you telling me to do it?
Well, I can tell you where where it came from. I've taught other parents this. So for years, I had, I don't know, at some point I decided, oh gosh, I'm raising kids that don't do anything. And so I started panicking as I do. And I'm like, oh, must teach them not to be entitled, and think that they just have people serving them all the time. Less ass wiping. And so I scrambled. And so we came up with like a setting the dinner table schedule, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, I don't know, whatever. Things got in the way or people would have activities or whatever. So then I decided when I'm making dinner, if I ask you to set the table, then there's no arguing. You just set the table.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if there's any pushback or you just choose not to do it, just know not only are you going to be asked to set the table, you're also going to be asked to clear all the dishes from the table. I literally put this plan in place that you don't have to do. You don't have to be autonomous. Like,
Right. Right.
maybe cross your fingers and hope that you didn't pick the short straw and mom doesn't
Right.
ask you to set the table. But
Right.
this was me thinking that I was helping them to not be entitled and expect to be served. If I ask you, there is no arguing, just do it. Just be a team player and do it. But now I set them up to, like, they need to be asked instead of just having the autonomy and the agency to just look at what needs to be done and get it done.
And I think it brings up a good point of like a lot of Western psychologists would say autonomy and independence are like very, very similar things, but a lot of people that study other cultures, it's different. It is freedom. It is this like you are choosing, but it is also you are turning inward towards the group a lot. So you are, and this gets kind of to the core of like what you, Andy asked me, what does it mean, to hunt, gather, parent? It's autonomy is not just you do whatever you want to do. It is you are also linked to this group, your family, usually, where your job is to be helpful in this group. So you have freedom in how you do that, how you help the group. You have freedom in when you help the group, often, most of the time, but you're constantly turning towards the group and saying, how can I be helpful with the group? Right? How can I share? Can I take care of a sibling? You clearly taught them to take care of each other because they want to take care of each other, right? So autonomy and agency from a cross-cultural perspective, and what I would argue kind of a more functional, a more hunt-gather parent family is it isn't just like you have agency and freedom to do what you need to do. You are also not constantly, but like very frequently looking to how you can help the rest of the group. But there is some agency there in the sense that like you're not being forced or there's some encouragement. And so I think that's a big piece that's missing in Western parenting is teaching a child to care about and motivating a child to want to help the group.
Well, can you talk about what that looks like in Tanzania? Like how they start to, like, how do they teach their kids that from a very young age? Do you have any like examples?
A lot of it has been studied in indigenous Mexico and Central America. So maybe we'll start there. I think it's easier. Parents all over the world start this at a very young age. But like I say, you can train it at any age because I literally trained a 40-year-old. So, and it's incredible how well it works. So it's, first of all, it's inclusion. You got to that point very early, right? Like even the babies, right, are sat next to the mom or the dad when they're working. People always say, but my work is so boring. I'm just on the computer. My toddler can't sit with me while I'm working. And I say to them, well, a lot of work in the Yucatan where we were by the women is weaving these beautiful hammocks. And you think that that's exciting? That is literally 6 hours of sitting there weaving, and toddlers will be with the mom. like sitting like there with them. They'll be playing, they have autonomy, but they're there. They're with the parents. They're included in the parents' lives from day one.
So when that mom is weaving and she's got like a 2-year-old.
Yeah, I think he was like 3. I
Okay.
watched this little boy for days. I think he was about 3 or 4.
Were there times where he was just like bored and like whining, or what did it look like? Yeah.
So he never whined, but he was like playing. He was playing with they had these little puppies. He was playing with them. You know, he was entertaining himself. And there's lots of documentation of like from babies up entertaining themselves. And I think that this actually gets at one of your questions, Randy, of like, what have we forgotten in the last 100 years? And I think we have forgotten that kids do not need us to entertain them. They do not need us to play with them. They don't need a screen. They don't need stimulation. At every moment, they do not. In fact, one could argue that it's a disservice to them. So he was entertaining himself. People would come buy the hammocks, talk to the mom. He would help with some of the stuff. Maybe sometimes she'd ask him to go get something, and he'd, go into the kids love to go get something. If you want to help get your kid involved with helping, have them go get stuff because I'm tired. Rosie, go outside and get something from the garden. Rosie, go across the street. Rosie, go grab this, right? Like they have energy. Okay, so that's really a big part is like having them there. So if the kid has not been with you when you're cooking and cleaning, the first thing to do is just say, hey, come over and hang out with me while I'm doing it. We can talk about screens later. They're hard. We have to deal with those on their own, but just come be with me and tell me. If they're older, come tell me about your day. Come tell me about something that they like. Just the first step is inclusion. And then the second step is getting them to do little tiny tasks, tiny tasks. And so like when the mom was cooking, if the kid was there, so as kids get older, they tend to spend a lot of time with friends, right? So we're talking about 4, 5, 6, the kid starts to get less time with the parents and more time with friends, right? But the parent tells the child, the older children, you need to look after your younger sibling while you're out playing. So there is instruction on like making sure that they don't go into the fire pit, making sure that they stay within a boundary. The older children are given these responsibilities to take care of the younger children. And again, this is autonomy. You can go play, you can go make your own decisions, move freely about your environment, but you have a responsibility to the group of taking care of the little one. And this, I think, is so lost. And I didn't write about siblings in the book. I really want to, but it's a big part of bringing cohesion to the siblings. It's giving this older kid this responsibility, right, to help the little one. And I think what it also does is then allows the little one to be more autonomous than they would be without the older helping them, right? So it's like a win-win situation, really. Then the mom, if she really needs help in the Yucatan, what I saw, for instance, when she washes the corn, she like really needs help because she needs the water turned on and off, right? She'd have to walk back and forth or something. She calls the kid over while they're playing outside. Hey, Helme, come over here and help me with the hose. There's these very small tasks, but they're real, right? The child is really helping somehow, and they last like minutes. It's not like, Helme, come here and wash the corn with me for an hour, So it's something that the kid can do very quickly, but it's meaningful. And this is really autonomy. The kid is playing, the kid is, and then I need this help, come over and help, or if the kid is nearby and if they'll see something that the mom needs, then, eventually that's what the mom wants, is the mom wants the kid to hop off their bike on their own and come over and help. And the older children will do things like that. But in a Western home, it's like I'm making dinner and it's like I got like a giant thing of carrots to cut. Well, I don't want to sit there and cut all the carrots for 15 minutes. So I'm like, Rosemary, help me cut the carrots. Come over and help me cut the carrots. And that's what she'll do some nights. That'll be it, but it's a real help.
Can I pause you on that?
Yeah, sure.
Say that again, how you let her know that her help is needed. Just say that one line again.
Hey, Rosemary, come over here and help me cut the carrots.
Okay. So that, right? And so much of like even things that you were talking about before, like when you guys were in Tanzania and you're out in the bush and it's like, Rosie, carry this.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Michaeleen, maybe they don't even say anything. Next thing you know,
They
they're
don't say
just
anything.
strapping a baby on your back. All of that is assertiveness.
Yes.
And so when you are including a kid and giving them a job that actually is going to be helpful, right? Like it's going
Right.
to make your life easier.
It has to really help you. Kids know if it's just fake.
Right. It's like participation trophies. It's like,
Yeah.
nobody feels proud of a participation trophy. So like
No.
nobody feels like they're a valuable member, contributing member, if it's just like a BS job that you're just trying to occupy them with. But if it's
That's right.
something that they're actually lightening your load, they feel that, they sense it. But the way Rosie, come cut these carrots, there's an assertiveness there. And let's talk about for a minute, and that's something that I picked out of your book as well, is like, we have lost in our Western society female assertiveness, right? I think it's why so many women are so indecisive and so confused.
Mm.
And I think if I had to say what's the main thing I do when I'm working with parents, the main thing I do is help women to become pack leaders, right?
Mm.
Helping
Mm-hmm.
women
Mm-hmm.
to become assertive, because quite often what happens is they come in and they would say that, that request that you made to Rosie, they wouldn't say it in an assertive way. They'd be like,
Right.
"Hey, Rosie, would you do me a favor? Could you come over here and help me for a sec?"
Yeah. Or do you want to help me? I love that
Yeah,
one. Like, do you want? Well,
right.
okay. I mean,
What do
it's
you think,
okay. It's
or
nothing
they try
bad,
to or
but
they try to sell it. Like, what do you think about, you coming and chopping up some carrots? Like, does that sound fun? Like they're trying, like it's almost like please be my friend, please hang out with me. And there's a graspiness there. And so little kids who are living in their present moment and they now all of a sudden are given this choice, they're like, oh, well, I'm happy over here doing this thing, right? Or I'm happy
yeah.
watching this show. No, I'm
Or
good.
they have to make the decision, right? If you say like, do you want to, or do you think it would be fun? Then the little kid has to sit there and decide,
Yeah.
which is like a cognitive load, right? We know decisions are hard. Sometimes they're not fun. And it's putting barriers in place for the kid to actually do the help. And I think what the parents in the book and what I learned is that the less barriers there are, the more likely the kid's going to do it. Right. And so like if Rosie is actually near me, it's easier, right? Like if she's kind of walking, that's why I say the first thing is just get them there. Right. Because if she's standing right there, I'm like, oh, grab the carrots from the refrigerator. Think about how easy that is. Nobody would even think about it as like helping. Right. And that's actually what I did with my husband, was like, just hang out with me in the kitchen. And so just the idea is to minimize the barriers and the stress that the child has to do it. Right. It's like they don't even realize they're really helping until they do it. And then they're like, oh, I cut all these carrots,
And would they ever say anything? Because I know, like, you talk a lot about how we just praise too much. The praise is all the time. And because I think, again, we're all going back to that model of a good mom, a good parent really encourages their kids and celebrates them constantly and builds up their self-esteem. Right. And so there's all this overpraising. For my son was recently, he did something and my friend, who's his friend's mom, she sent me this text like, Corey's such a mensch, which is a Yiddish word for like a good deed doer. And because he helped clean something up, and so I sent Corey like a screenshot or something like that of it. I was like, look, were your ears burning? And he sends back a thing and he said, she really needs higher standards. Like I literally.
Well, actually, that is what I was thinking when you said, like, that we don't assert ourselves. I mean, I think the problem is the expectations are so low for the child. We're actually expecting them not to want to help, not to want to contribute. And I think I think that's actually one of the things we've lost is this idea and this knowledge that like children want to contribute. They want to have purpose in our families. They want to help. They totally do. Every human being wants to help. It's what makes us humans, Homo sapiens, is that we want to help each other and be cooperative. But we've decided that somehow that's like a burden on them. And so we are like begging them to help when in actuality, them helping is helping themselves, helping them.
That's right.
You know, I'm doing Rosie a favor when I say, come help me with the carrots. When I say, you know, that's a favor for her. And in fact, in some cultures, including the Maya culture, being included in an activity is somewhat of a reward.
That's interesting.
There's actually this incredible study down in southern Mexico where the parents, this Mayan researcher documents where the parents actually say no to the child who wants to help for a bit. Just every now and then, well, or just kind of, I don't know if you're ready. You know, I don't know if you're old enough to do that. This is something I tell parents to do when they're like, the kid is like kind of refusing to do something. It's like, well, just, oh, that's because you're not ready yet.
So good.
That's because you're not mature enough. So and the parents say that this gets the child even wanting to help more, you know? And so, yeah, we need to raise our expectations for our children.
And what
They're
would
too
you,
low.
and I can only imagine that people that have really been learning how to parent and specifically going by, you know, whatever the clinicians have told them is the right way to raise humans that aren't going to have mental health problems.
Yes.
They might say, well, isn't that manipulative? Aren't you just trying to manipulate them?
I'm not sure. Like, you'd have to define manipulation. I mean, basically you're saying I should never like motivate my child, encourage my child to do what I know will make them feel good and grow up to be like a healthy human being. Right? I mean, you know, I think a manipulation is like something that's like devious and I'm gaining and they're losing, but I'm actually,
that's it.
This is actually helping them.
Right. There's nothing devious about it. It's actually tapping into human motivation, right?
Yes,
because
exactly.
Every little kid, you know, like if we're not growing, we're dying. So like, I think there's a primal part of us that knows I am meant to get bigger. I am meant to get older, right? Even though maybe when we become grown-ass women, we're like, wait, whoa. I don't like all the gray hairs and the wrinkles that are happening. But, you know, but like we know from very tiny age that we're meant to get older and we're meant to grow. So when you tell a little kid that they seem like a bigger kid, that they, you know, and you're like I don't know if you can handle this responsibility. Like it's a lot. And then all of a sudden the kid is motivated because it's a challenge. And so then they do that thing and then they feel a sense of accomplishment. And then you're like, well, you know, I'm eating my words now. You really surprised me. I didn't think you were ready for all that, but you showed me. Like, I think.
And you've given them like, okay, you've given them purpose, which I'd love to talk about more. You've given them connection to you, right? Because when you help somebody, there's tons of studies that show when you help somebody, it feels so good to you. It's one of the biggest joys of living is helping other people, right? You've given them an opportunity to grow. Like you said, you've given them so much by challenging them in this way. I think maybe we have to stop thinking of it as like they're helping us. We're helping them by teaching them how to contribute and be a contributing member of the family. A big thing in psychology right now in education psychology is this thing eudaimonia. And I wrote a piece about it. A lot of psychologists have focused, positive psychology has focused on life satisfaction, happiness, really, like are children happy? And there's a big thing rising up now in psychology that's like, we've forgotten about this thing of eudaimonia, which is purpose and having opportunities to fulfill your purpose and knowing what that is. And that this is just as important as feeling happy. And there's all the studies that show you do better in school if you have eudaimonia and you feel better. It protects against anxiety. And when we're not allowing the child to help at dinner, to help around the house, to help at work with your work, to have some purpose in the family, we are not giving them eudaimonia. In me saying, oh, I don't know if you're ready to motivate with a little wink in my eye,
right,
is actually offering a route to eudaimonia for the child. And so it's like, maybe the mindset needs to shift in the sense of like, you're not just helping me with the carrots. I'm giving you an opportunity to help yourself in many, many ways. And you know, and I think what's lost is this reciprocal relationship, right? This is a very common theme in Indigenous communities, that like the earth gives, the environment gives, nature gives, but it takes. You know, like, you know, one summer there could be no food. And so you not only take from the environment, you give back. And it's the same with the parent-child relationship. The parent gives. Oh, the parent gives to the child, all giving. But the child needs to learn to give back to the parent as well. And that's what you're teaching, right? And some reciprocal relationship needs to happen for it to be healthy and for it to grow and for it to mature. This is a very Indigenous way of thinking. And we don't give children the opportunity to reciprocate by having them in front of a screen, by saying, oh, they're just doing their homework, you know, by not valuing opportunities for eudaimonia, really.
If you have a little tiny kid and you're like, okay, I'm going to start including them.
Yes.
And giving them actual jobs, like hold this thing. And it's something that helps you out. Or could you go get my sweater? You know, or you're right.
Yeah.
And what if you have a little kid that you're like, hold this thing, and you're cooking and you're trying to get them to hold the plate, and they're like, no, hold me, mommy, hold me.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, you could say, like, well, what do I do when Rosie doesn't come over for the carrots?
Right.
Right. You know? So if the little baby is saying, hold me, and I don't know how old it is, but I would say the baby needs more touch. The baby needs more physical. Yeah. More physical love. I would say put that baby on your back. You know? And in the book I talk about, Rosie was 3.5, almost 4. And that's what the Inuit the moms were like, that Rosie needs to be packed. That's what they call it when the kid is riding on the back. She needs more physical touch.
So good.
That's another thing we've lost, is like that.
I wore my baby. Oh my gosh, did I wear my babies? I was like, and back then it was, you know, and I live in Texas. So, I mean, when I went to California, I saw plenty of people wearing their babies, but you know, I wore the baby Bjorn with all of them. But the main reason I wore them was actually because I found strollers to be super cumbersome, and like, it was just like a lot taking it out and then doing the thing. And then when you're trying to, like, when you're running errands, it's like this whole extra thing. And you're such a, like, I also felt like I was like in the way all the time. And so I just, for convenience, just started wearing them. And I remember with my daughter, she was really small and she wasn't walking, and she was like 16 months old. And we were traveling and I was wearing her in the baby Bjorn and she hadn't started walking yet. And then all of a sudden, like it was like a light bulb moment where I was like, oh, maybe she doesn't walk because I wear all the freaking time. Like, I think I got to stop wearing.
But then she did walk.
Yeah.
So
and then she started walking like immediately.
That's so great. I mean, that's when it turns into like your instincts, right? It's like, if the baby's screaming, I don't want to hold the cup. Well, who cares if it's holding the cup? You know, right. like one of the moms said to me after she read the book, one of the moms in the Arctic, she's like, yeah, the book is good, because I had a bunch of them read it. And she says, it's great, but you don't really need all this. And this gets to like how complex we make things, right? She said, you know, you just need to think, like, is this hurting my relationship with my child, or is this helping my relationship with my child? And she's like, if it's hurting, try something else. Don't do it. And if it's helping, continue. And it's like, you know, if the kid is screaming that they don't want to help, this is not encouraging help. You know, this is only discouraging help. You know, the kid's saying, hold me, definitely. Put the baby on and do all your chores. Like, just that inclusion is it sounds crazy, but it is the most important aspect of helping, is just being there.
Right.
And just try again. You know, a lot of times out here, like, if a kid doesn't do something, you know, they're not ready for it. They're doing something else. You know, what I've learned with Rosie, a lot of times I'll sometimes say, when you're ready, can you do this? You know, if she's doing something, because, you know, she's older now, and I respect that she's like focusing on something, or if she's reading or something, you know, like, when you're ready, you know, it's about trying to create an environment where it's not conflictual, right? Like, we think that conflict is kind of innate in the parent-child relationship. And of course, there is some conflict in all relationships, but it can be very minimal. And so it's like, look, if this isn't working, don't force it. Forcing it is only going to make it not work more.
Well, yeah, it's, you talk about in the book, like shifting from control to cooperation.
Yeah.
And, that's what having a sense of agency is really all about, is you feel in control of your life and your decisions. And you might think, well, this is a kid. Like, there's a reason why childhood is childhood. Like, they're not ready to be in control. But if we give them all these little teeny tiny moments to feel in control and to get to contribute and to feel like a valuable member of the pack, that gives a person a sense of agency. And that ultimately, I want to say, these moms that showed up in these different communities, like, these moms sound like they are confident women
Yes.
who
Yes.
know who they are, right? Who do what they say they're
Yes.
going to do, right? And I'm like,
Yes.
where does that come from? And where I kind of think that's the crux of the last 100 years of where we have gotten it wrong. And what the results of that have been, I think, is that you have especially women who are still in most households that I have interacted with. The women are still doing the majority of the parenting and the majority of the caretaking. And yet the pack leadership piece and that, that confidence, that assertiveness, that is what's lacking.
I think you are exact. I hadn't thought of this before, but I think that's why I love you, Randy. You always make me think of new things. But I think moms have been stripped of that confidence.
Right.
I think society has stripped that away from us, and it makes us question. It makes us feel like we have to do 100,000 things at every moment. And you're exactly right. That is a big difference. Is the parents in the book, the moms in the book, are like, they know what they do works. They've seen it work.
And they were raised that way.
And they were raised that way. And they have this confidence in them. And I would argue that women in America, Western women in America, can have that. There's a flame inside them. It's smaller and it's been, but it's in there. You know that, like, if your kid is screaming at you at 8:00 every night when it's time to go to bed and it's just a total hot mess every night and stressful, that can't be right.
That's right.
Right. And maybe even though you're following all the rules, right. And that maybe if you just kind of did less, I'm telling you, just do less. Like, talking about helping, it's like, you don't even need to say anything. If the kid is there, give them the plate.
That's right.
That's what confidence is this, like, what I do is going to work and I don't need to do anymore.
I don't have to justify it. I don't have to try to convince you. I don't have to try to control you. Like, this is just what we're doing.
This is just what we're doing. And if you don't do it at every moment, it's all right.
Well, and
I'm not going to force it into you,
right.
And
it doesn't say anything about me if you're choosing not to be cooperative right now. Like, one thing one thing I did, getting it wrong with the dinner table, setting the dinner table, was if I had a kid that was in a mood and was like, no, ask someone else, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And then it was like, at the end of dinner, it was like, okay, so remember, you're the one clearing the table. And if I did have a kid that was like, I'm not doing that, I was like, okay, well, maybe tomorrow you'll choose to be helpful. And we would just move on.
But you did point out to them that they weren't being helpful.
Yeah.
Which I think is key. You didn't just say, like, okay, that's fine. You're so good. You're such a helpful person.
No.
You didn't just praise them, which, you pointed out. I mean, we can be honest with kids.
I was honest. Like, I was honest. Yeah. And I wasn't shaming. I wasn't mean about it, but I wasn't happy. Yeah. And I wasn't particularly happy about it. Okay, well, maybe tomorrow you'll choose to be helpful. And then we just quickly move on. I wouldn't give it any more airtime.
The child knows. Mm-hmm. I think that is so important to point out, especially with younger kids, like, what is helpful, what is not, what is expected, what is not in an emotional way, right? Because I think then you get into, like, shaming and all this, but just factual. you
Well,
know?
and on those nights when I did have a kid that was just refusing to be helpful, um, especially when I would handle it like that and not give it any airtime, it almost always turned into that kid going to bed and saying, "Mom, can you come here for a minute?"
Oh.
And then telling me whatever it was that was eating at them. They had a shitty
Mm,
day, somebody hurt their
mm,
feelings, there was a teacher that got
mm-hmm.
mad at them, they got a bad score on something, whatever it was. And I
Right,
was like, and it would turn into a conversation where I would say, I had a feelings there was something else going on. Yeah,
right,
that would put me in
right.
a terrible mood too. I get it. I'm sorry that that happened.
That's a very fascinating observation of like when kids are demotivated, kind of going against you. If you already have a good relationship with them, right, then it's a sign of something else.
Right. It's a sign, but I think so often because it goes back to the where, this our Western culture has conditioned women not to be assertive, not to be confident, right? Not to know how to step into this style of pack leadership. And so what happens is when you have a kid that won't listen, won't cooperate, the mom who is already second guessing the way she's doing it and feeling a bit insecure, she's going to take that behavior very personally. She's going to make it
Mm-hmm,
about
mm-hmm,
her.
mm-hmm.
She's going to think, it's going to trigger her brain into all the times that she was dismissed, ignored, disrespected.
Right,
And it turns a
right.
mountain, it makes it turns it a mountain into a molehill, a molehill into a
A
mountain.
molehill into a
Yes,
mountain.
a
Yes,
molehill into a
yes,
mountain.
yes.
And then we miss the opportunity to have that moment with our kids where they're telling us what's really at the root of this unhelpful behavior.
It's fascinating. I have a friend whose mom is a psychologist, and she was visiting, and I was trying to get Rosie to do something, and I forgot what it was. It doesn't even matter. And Rosie didn't do it, and I was just like, okay, it's like I didn't really care, like I was just like because yeah, I'm up for the long haul here. I'm not in it to like this is not a sprint. And the woman said, "Oh, she's manipulating you." Because I didn't like argue with her, but I didn't force her to do whatever I was asking. She said, "You just got pushed around and manipulated." And I was just like, wow. Like that's the position that a parent is supposed to be in, that everything they tell the child has to do, or they're being manipulated. Like I was really,
Well, I can't tell
and
you
I
I
think
I can't tell you how many people have told me that they've gone to different psychologists and therapists and I look, I know there's a lot of amazing psychologists and therapists out there. I'm not dissing the whole field here, but I can't tell you how many are doling out outdated information, and they are telling parents to start bribing and using sticker charts and reward systems and incentivizing kids to be cooperative. So I think there are a decent amount of therapists who are still telling parents to manipulate kids to get them to be cooperative.
there is this strong sense that like if the kid doesn't do what you say, you've somehow lost.
Yeah. Right.
And they've won, right? It's like there's this competition between you two, and it's like who's in control. There's a fascinating study from LA where the dad tells the child to put his shoelaces on, and he's 8 years old, getting ready for school, and tie his shoes, and the kid doesn't want to do it, and the dad is with this kid for like 15 minutes or 10 minutes in front of these researchers, right?
Mm.
This isn't like behind doors, so it's like, and the researcher discusses it, like what is happening here, and why is the parent feeling this need for the child to listen to everything the parent says in the moment. This is something that's really different around the world. Like parents will just say things like, tie your shoes, or they won't even tell an 8-year-old to tie their shoes, right? It's like the 8-year-old should know, but go do this, and do this, and if the kid doesn't do it, the parent just doesn't care. But there is this sense in our society, I think, that the parent has lost. They've lost power, they've lost control, and I think that's some of it where these moles get turned into mountains, because we have this kind of false sense of like everything we say the child must do or we aren't in control. But in fact, you lose your power when you start to argue with the
That's
child,
exactly
right?
right. I teach this tool, big deal, little deal. And it's like, really assess when you feel yourself getting all worked up. A tool that you can
Yeah.
use, just like a mind mastery tool, is to stop yourself and take a breath and say, okay, is this a big deal or a little
Mm.
deal? And if it's a
Mm.
little deal, then blow it off. Like, allow it to be
Like,
a
who
little
cares?
deal. Who freaking cares? Why are you why you're going to damage your relationship over something
Right.
ridiculous? Like, no, we're playing the long game here. Like, it's not, if I saw an 8-year-old who was walking out the door without, tied shoes, I'd be like, hello, you want to do something there? And if I had a kid that was being lazy, which probably would have been my third child, he'd be like, it's fine. I'd be like, okay, well, my mama self is going to feel nervous that you're going to eat it and knock your 2 front teeth out. And
Yeah.
then I would just bend down and tie their shoes for them.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing, right? I mean, it's just to do it.
Right.
Like, a lot of parents would just be like, well, if he falls, he's going to learn, right?
I would know,
But
my anxiety would be like, those 2 front teeth are getting knocked out. I'm tying
right.
their
And then you'd
shoes.
have to pay for the dental. So like, but then a lot of parents would just tie the shoes.
Right. I'm just going to tie the shoes. And you know what? It's like, when you come from a place of yes and you don't sweat the little deals, guess what? Kids learn by what we model. So then next thing you know,
Exactly.
that's what they're doing for their siblings. That's what they're doing for their friends. That's what they're doing for you. It's just,
Exactly. Instead of picking all the time and I have to win, right? I was going to say that you're then modeling like, look, I would argue that 98% of the things are little deals.
Right. I would agree with you. There's so few, and I do this with my husband all the time because he can, and now, he has 3 young adult children where we all sort of gang up on him because his first response is always to kind of go to everything's a big deal. And he'll like, what? I can't believe you and we're like, really? Like, all like everybody's like, and now we just laugh. Although my daughter sometimes will bully him and she's like, are you really crying about that, Dad? Like, really? Like, and he's like, you guys are so mean to me. Yeah, I know, we can't help it. We can't help it because he's, he was just conditioned to, and he can't help himself. And so now we just kind of laugh about it. Okay. Before we end, I would love for you to weigh in on one scenario from
Sure.
From one of the participants of the Masterminding Monthly call, which was all about school mornings, like craziness. And
Yes.
I know that, like, in the book, you talk I love that story about the Maya mom who, how many kids did she have?
I was just thinking about her the other day.
Like 6?
I think
5. And it was a 20-minute. Yeah. And for me, I also, with my kids, it was a 30-minute from wake up to leave. Like, we were like,
yeah,
let's just get it done.
Go.
So I was thinking about how you observed this mom and just how she handled school mornings, and with 5 kids. Anyway, I would love for you to weigh in on Sarah's question. She says, how do you get a kid to go to school that refuses to go?
This is such a hard question, right? Because school is really non-natural, I would say, for a lot of kids, right? It's like it's very new. We did not evolve to go to school. And I would first start there.
Mm-hmm.
I would first start with like, look, I get it. I mean, I think he's in 6th grade. Middle school was like a nightmare for me. I mean, like, I hated every moment of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I get it. Like, I understand kids have to go to school. I'm not saying that they don't, but I am very empathetic with this child. And I would start there. And then I would try to figure out what's going on. There's something, it kind of goes back to what you said with the kid who didn't want to help clean up. There's something deeper happening that the kid is not sharing, I think.
100%.
I think that there's,
yeah.
And I would start to try to figure that out. I would first start to say, okay, like, I'm crazy. And I would even say, okay, you know what? Let's take a day off.
I would
You don't
too.
want to go to school?
Yeah.
Let's take a day off. I'm going to take a day off from work and we're going to do something that we both want to do. That both of us would enjoy. Something like here, it's this, like there's like a spring here. I did this with Rosie actually when we first moved, and I said, I was having a hard time at work. I was like, we're taking the day off. We're going to this beautiful spring. We're going to hang out. And then I would start trying during that day to figure out what is going on, and not deep, but just like while you're driving, like, hey, is there something at school that's happening? Or I would start to try to get this kid to open up a little bit about why they don't want to go. That's where I would start.
That's me too. Before we can get to the main point that was the main point that I taught on that call, which was all about helping kids to have agency over their mornings. And so, it might involve them being late. It might involve them forgetting things.
Mm-hmm. Not having a lunch.
Right. Not having a lunch.
They're not going to starve.
Right. And really owning their mornings and how to have those conversations to help them own their mornings. But before you can have a kid that wants to have agency over how they get to school, you have to get to the root of why they're so opposed to going.
Yes.
Because kids naturally love to learn. Humans love to learn. And it might be that, I can't tell you how many people their kids don't get diagnosed with like dyslexia, until like 8th grade. Like somehow, this kid has figured out to do the bare minimum, and no one realized how exhausting it all is, and they're not being taught to read in the way that makes sense to their brain. That's such an exhausting existence. So it could go a number of different ways. It could be social issues. It could be a learning difference that hasn't been flagged yet. Like there's something to figure out. And so if we're just trying to control a kid and get them to do the thing without putting on our detective hat, right? Like we're missing something really critical, I think. So I think it's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hate is like such a strong, like we don't even use that word in our house because it just, very sparingly, right? Because, it's like we don't go throw it around. I hate this. I hate that. It's a very strong word for a kid, 11-year-old to say. And it's like, for me, that's a red flag. It's like something deeper is happening here that would need to be figured out. Yeah, I feel for the kid. School is hard. School is hard for a lot of kids. There's a lot of kids that, they're just not built to sit down like that all day.
Oh, my kids all hated school.
Go to eudaimonia.
Yeah.
Where's the eudaimonia? What is my purpose here? A lot of it, they're actually revamping, psychologists want to revamp the school system to make more purpose, right? And so it's hard. I think we have to acknowledge that as parents.
I say it all the time to parents. Like I think our education system is completely outdated, and it's still based on the glorified daycare model from like the Industrial Revolution, and it's
training factory workers.
Yeah.
That's what middle school, I remember it's like, whoa, now there's bells and I have lockers and I have to rush and I look back on it. It's like, I was absolutely being trained to like work in the factory at some level.
Yeah. It wasn't, I am a person who is like, I love to learn. And I loved to learn when I was little, when I was like, in elementary. I remember loving to learn, loving to read. And then middle, high school, college even, I was just doing what I had to do to get the hell out of there. I did not love to learn anymore. I did not find it engaging. I also didn't go to the I went to public school. Like, I'm sure they were fine. But I don't remember any superstar teachers. It wasn't engaging to me at all. And I remember feeling like, when I was in elementary school, my parents always thought, they were always telling me how smart I was. And then middle, high school, college, I was like, they're going to find out that I'm not that smart. Like I actually don't love to learn. I don't think I'm very good at this. Like I would just cram and pull it out at the 11th hour. And now as an adult, I love to learn, but I love to learn in an engaging way, the way humans were designed to learn, right?
Yeah.
And I just think that
Yeah, like through like practical things, right? Which school, like a
it
lot of
it
schools
like
don't
made me
have.
lose that for decades.
Yeah.
I mean, because of that school model, I literally thought that I didn't like to learn, and it took me
Mm,
becoming an adult and then getting to learn in ways that sounded interesting to me, not through a
yeah.
textbook or sitting in a classroom. And so I'm like, "Oh, isn't that wonderful?" Like school literally made me a non-learner. And then
Yeah.
I had to remember, oh, I do like learning. I just don't like learning like a factory worker.
Right.
Okay, so this obviously we could talk and talk and talk, but we have to get on with our day. I love this conversation.
Oh, Randy, thank you so much. I hope it's helpful.
I hope so too. It was helpful to me. It was fun to talk about. And we're going to do 2 more. So everybody get excited. And also, the next topic that I thought might be fun to touch on is judgy adults, judgy relatives,
Yes.
judgy other parents when you feel like
Yes.
you're being judged. So for anybody who has a scenario about another parent or a relative or somebody who you feel like has said some super shitty, judgy thing, we want to hear from you. So send it to info@mastermindparenting.com and send us your scenario, and we just might read it and talk about it on our next episode. Okay. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening today, guys. I hope you picked up some tips, tools, maybe some baby steps for creating more balance and boundaries in your life. And I just wanted to let you know, if you want to continue moving the needle forward in creating this for yourself, having a happier household, I want you to go to my website and check out mastermindparenting.com. We have 3 beginning programs, and if you need some accountability and more support, then please look for the one that would be a good fit for you. And as always, we're on all the social channels under Mastermind Parenting. On Instagram, it's mastermind_parenting. And, periodically I do pop up on different Instagram lives, Facebook lives, where I give you teaching and coaching, and I love engaging with you live to help you help your strong-willed kids so that they can feel better, because when they feel better, they do better. And I love, love, love getting to know you guys. So thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Super, super appreciative.